Episode 205, Fighting Fair, Turning Anger into Growth in Relationships with Glenn Lovelace.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a highly trained, experienced life coach making a great impact in the lives of their clients. And together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with the coach? Here we go.
In this insightful episode, Coach Glenn Lovelace shares powerful lessons about managing anger and conflict in relationships. Drawing from personal experiences, including a life-altering accident and a close call involving his son, Glenn delves into the importance of recognizing and managing anger as a natural human emotion. He explores the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, relationship patterns from John Gottman, and offers practical tools for fighting fair and fostering deep connections. From understanding the value of disharmony to using anger constructively, this episode is a deep dive into navigating the complexities of relationships while maintaining self-certainty and spiritual alignment. Please enjoy.
Hey, y'all. Welcome to the podcast today. I am here with Coach Glenn Lovelace. Hello, Glenn.
Hello, how are you, Heather?
I am fantastic. Nice to have you here. Glenn's been on before. We've been hosting the podcast long enough now that I get repeats with the coaches, right? And I love it. It makes for great conversations because we can build upon past conversations. If you haven't listened to some of Glenn's previous calls or previous recordings, sorry, as I stumble around, go back and listen to those and listen to his, you have a unique way of teaching and influencing. So anyway, I'm glad to have you here with me today. But for those who have not heard any of our past calls, will you introduce yourself a little bit to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So Glenn, I've been married about 20 years. I've got 7 kids, which is still weird for me to say because never thought I would have this many, but they are so fun. I've been in coaching since 2008. So I've had somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 one-on-one clients, which is quite a bit, actually. I started in the online space with making money online, kind of got in the fitness space when I won a contest in 2017 with weight loss, building muscle. And then in 2019, I went to the life coach school because I realized I could give people the to-dos on how to get the result, but helping them undo that ball of yarn in their heads and their minds and then their spirits. I just needed a little bit more, and the life coach school and other trainings since then have really helped me dive deep into myself, which is always ironic. You go to do some work to help other people and then realize it's a transformation all for you. And so I'm always transforming, always facing and seeing different problems in my own life and in society, and then seeking answers. And I really have learned over the years that God can give us all kinds of answers that are very, very unique. And we just have to ask for them and sit in the fire for a bit. So I did have a crazy accident last summer, June of 2023. I broke my neck in 3 places, broke my back, my ribs, ruined my left arm, which is my dominant arm. And I've really had an opportunity to be on my back for months, almost died twice. And that really resets your life in a way that most of us would never choose to do. And so as I've been putting pieces back together, it's been very interesting to feel like fathered by God. There's a book out there called Fathered by God. And I relate to that a lot because it's kind of been outside of my control in so many ways, and then just turning it over to him. And so kind of living by faith has been very, very, very uncomfortable when as a man, I can't control the outcome, or I can't force a result, and I can't provide and do all the things that I was familiar with doing. And so I've been on a whole nother unique journey through that situation, all while trying to still be married and a dad and keep food on the table. It's been a wild ride. And even now, I can't say that I'm completely comfortable. I'm very, very uncomfortable still, which is good. And then recently, one other side to our story that's fresh, my son got in a terrible accident on Monday. I do not know how he's alive. If you saw pictures of the situation, and what I wanted to share with that is just living a life that's led by the Spirit. I just can't harp on that enough. But every moment that I've had where the Spirit has prompted us over the years, I share it with my kids and really trying to help them hone in on their, liahona, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And what Tice told me, my oldest, is that he was driving and the Spirit yelled at him 3 times to put his seatbelt on. And then within a mile, he went from 50 plus miles an hour to a total stop in like 60 feet because somebody pulled out in front of him. And it was just so bad. But as a dad, 2 things. I'm just so grateful he's okay. He has some bumps and bruises and a small fracture. But number 2, that he's having his own miracles and his own experiences with God. So, yeah, I mean, I could probably talk for quite a bit. I do. Again, we talked probably in February or March, and I was working on my book, and it's still not done, but that's getting closer and closer. So I'm excited about the book. It's called Heal the Boy, Forge the Man. And so it just keeps writing itself. So I don't know when it's going to end and be done, but we'll see.
You're probably beginning to hope that it gets done soon because maybe you're like, there feels like there's all these experiences that are happening to give you content for this book.
Absolutely. It's like, okay, is this done yet? Because we can start volume 2 maybe, but anyway. So it's been a wild ride of I'm a man, but I still don't know what I'm doing yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And as I'm listening to you speak or talk right now, it's so fascinating to me because we all do this. We all live in kind of this illusion that we have control over our lives. And we like to think that things are certain and that we can control all the things. And honestly, the only thing that we have really control over and certainty over is our relationship with God and our ability to learn to connect with him and be find the peace that's available there, because everything else is pretty out of our control.
Yeah, and I would add to that, so we have control of our relationship with God because of our agency. And so we do have control over ourselves, and we're not going to show up great because we're living in new times every day, new situations, new injuries, new relationships, and challenging ones. And so having that connection with yourself and then being led by God, outside of that, it's like we just really have to learn to let go, control what we can, and then just enjoy the ride, I guess. It's crazy.
I like to call that self-certainty, right? We all want like the certainty that's outside of us, and really, expanding upon what I just said, really the only thing that is certain is our certainty in ourself, our ability to trust ourselves. And that is directly connected to our certainty with God, right? Like they go hand in hand. So.
Yeah. And I think it's okay when we're not certain. I mean, those new situations are intended to stimulate uncomfortable thoughts, feelings, and actions, things that we have to apologize for. Actually learning how to use the atonement in a way that's very unique every time we use it. And it's not easy to make mistakes, it's tricky, but things are going to expose us.
Yeah. There's a book. Have you ever read it, by Peter Enns? It's called The Sin of Certainty. He's not an LDS author, but he is a religious leader. And I love the book so much because it talks about like our, as humans, we want things to be certain, but being certain is also the absence of faith. So that's the first doctrine, the first principle of our gospel. And so is faith, right? So if we want certainty, faith no longer exists. Anyway, I could talk about that for a really long time, but I just think there's so many, we need, the uncertainty is there for a reason, because that is how we build that relationship with God. So
absolutely. No, I love that. I'll check out the book.
It's a good one. All right. We could keep rambling, but we have a great topic that we're going to discuss today, and one that people might be like, ooh, it might feel a little bit prickly when we
I hope it does. I hope it does prickle.
It's the prickles that get us moving sometimes. Okay, so tell us where we're going.
Yeah, so I noticed, my whole life I've been somewhat of the avoidant attachment style, where I avoid difficult, truthful, challenging conversations because of contention and anger and hurt feelings, and just trying to manage myself and understand those things rather than blaming other people for how they're responding to me. And so as I've done my own unique work with my relationship with anger, for example, I've learned quite a bit. And so I feel like today could be a little bit disruptive, but with disruption comes like new ideas, new thoughts. And if we can kind of plant those new thoughts, we can get kind of a unique harvest off of them. So I just wanted to talk about anger.
Ooh, anger. Listen, everybody just all of a sudden went, ooh, I don't know about this.
Yeah, it doesn't feel comfortable. No. Because we don't like how we show up generally with anger, and we have a hard time controlling other people, obviously. And so if they're angry towards us, and so trying to sort through that can be very, very challenging, especially in a marriage or close relationships and eternal relationships that we're trying to nurture long term. So it can cause a lot of problems.
Yeah. It's so interesting because we live in this world where we are very quick to anger, right? Like, especially right now with the political, I don't even want to go into that, but people are quick to anger if we don't agree with their views. And the anger is okay. It's what we choose to do with the anger, right? Like, we can still be very connected with people who we have angry feelings for, who have different views from us. That's actually very healthy. That's the way it's meant to be. So we have to have these conversations about anger, and and it's easy for us to get angry, I think, with people that like I don't know, we see their comments online. We don't really feel so bad about that because we're like, oh, they're a distant person that we don't know. But when it's somebody that's in your face, somebody who lives with you, somebody who you see on a regular occasion, that feels a lot worse.
Yeah. I think it would be like good to maybe understand what anger is, or what's our judgment of anger. Yeah. And so kind of making it very simple, it's just like anger is a human emotion. We're all human. We're all entitled to have a full human experience. And if we have judgment towards certain emotions, then we're missing out on key indicators as to how we're responding to ourselves and others in life. And so if we completely avoid a certain emotion, or if we're constantly showing up in a certain emotion like anger as a response to everything, or we're making assessments of other people that they're always angry, even though according to them they're not angry, then we're just creating a big old mess. And so one of the things I had to realize first is, what's my judgment towards anger? Do I allow it? Do I allow myself to feel anger? And do I allow other people to express themselves in anger? And what does anger even feel like with me? Is it a state of reacting to something? Because it could be a reaction of like a perceived threat. It could be a reaction to an injustice, or somebody's harming somebody or me. It could just be that I'm frustrated or annoyed. And it could be all kinds of different challenges. And so I really need to departmentalize what it is, because if it's a perceived physical threat, anger is one of the best ways to keep yourself safe. But it has a lot of consequences if you're reactive and not in a state of control, and you're not managing that situation. And so, I mean, we see one of the things that triggered me to want to look into this, or activated is a better word, activated into looking into anger, was that husband down in Enoch, Utah, who killed his mother-in-law, killed his wife and kids, and then he killed himself. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
And I've had moments where I've seen flashes of total red, meaning like it just surges through me, and it's like, wow, this is that danger that Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychotherapist, talks about. He's like, your ability to be a good man and powerful man is in like teeter-totter with how much damage can you do as a man, but still control and keep those emotions in composed nature, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just kind of like this thing to play with, like, wow, if I don't manage anger and I go down a road of responding and reacting towards other people, every one of us guys is capable of great harm to other people. And that great harm inversely is also our potential to do good. It's kind of this opposition thing where my ability to do good is also inversely dependent on how much damage I can do to a society. And it sounds terrible to think that way, but if we believe in opposition and magnitude and that volitude of that experience, this is something that's very important for all of us to consider as we get more and more comfortable with anger. So what I realized was for myself is that scripture in 3rd Nephi that says contention is of the devil. And what I noticed is I made all anger wrapped up in a package that was contentious, which isn't true. I thought it was, and I was super convinced that all anger was contention. And so for those of us who are Christian, LDS, whatever the case might be, I had to realize that I had judgment of others who expressed anger because I made it under that umbrella that all anger was contentious. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you want me to keep rolling with this, I had to define what contention was for me. And then I started to realize that, okay, here's 4 key indicators that show me when I'm being contentious. And then also it allowed me to create boundaries for other people and how they treated me from their anger. So instead of attacking anger as this large problem, I was able to say, hey, and I have to educate my relationships on these 4 things, keep myself in control, and then invite them to play the same game with me. And it comes from John Gottman, the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Are you familiar with the 4 Horsemen?
I am very familiar with the 4 Horsemen. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, do you like that idea of the 4 horses being an introduction to like contention?
Absolutely, because it gives us a place to start, right? Like it gives us a place to put our thoughts, I think, is like to take a step back for just a second and to be like, okay, how do I respond? What is my go-to when I am angry, right? When I'm feeling that contention. And I think it's a great key for awareness.
Totally. And like you said, it's a place to start. It's a place to see something. It's not something that Glenn or Heather or somebody made up. Like John Gottman's been around for decades now.
Yep.
And he's got enough statistics that's like, okay, there's some outliers here, but this is pretty irrefutable.
Yep.
And for those who might be new to John Gottman, and he has a couple great books like 7 Principles to Making Marriage Work and something about how to understand women or what women really want or something like that.
Their most recent one is called Fight Right. Have you read that one?
Oh, I haven't. I should have read that for this.
Yeah, this falls
episode.
Right underneath all of that. It's very good. So Fight Right is very good.
Yeah, and I've dubbed it as Fight Fair.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it sounds like this book would be great for me.
I mean, that's just the very concept, right? Like,
yeah,
anger leads to it's contentious. It leads to fighting, but
right.
Fighting is connection, right? Like that's how we connect. That's how we grow. If we are never, I think he gives a statistic someplace or somebody does. It's like relationships are usually like good relationships are like 70% harmonious and 30% disharmonious. And it's in that disharmony where we grow even more. That disharmony is important, because if we can learn how to have disharmony correctly, that's kind of that's where the growth comes from. That's the growing machine.
Absolutely. And so I look at fighting like the gym. Like when I go to the gym, I want to hurt myself, like intentionally. That's how I create growth or progress. But in my marriage, I realized my wife is the angry person in this narrative that I have. And I just didn't know how to keep up. I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't even know how to feel because I was so reactive to it and so judgmental to it. And apparently she wasn't even ever angry, but based on what I saw, I was like, I would never show up that way unless I was angry. And so when I look at fighting fair or fighting right, these concepts from John Gottman really helped me to see my part and then make requests of Amber where it's like, hey, I think you're showing up. We should maybe dive into the 4 horses really quick.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we probably should like take a step back really fast and explain those a little bit.
Yeah. So we have criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, right? I don't know if we like quickly go through these.
Yeah, maybe let's just give a quick definition of what each of them are.
Cool. Stonewalling is where you like withdraw, you shut down, and you won't engage in the conversation. This typically looks like you don't talk, you walk away, you don't talk for days. Like I was at a ward barbecue on Friday, and one of the guys there was joking about his parents because they hadn't talked in like 5 days or something crazy. And so that's total stonewalling, right? Defensiveness kind of looks like, maybe you're getting criticized on what you did or didn't do, and you're just being like really reactive to it. So typically that looks like Amber says, hey, you didn't, wash my car. You said you were going to wash my car Saturday. And then, I'm supposed to be like, okay, I got busy today. I'm sorry. Oh, that's what I have a path of what I'm supposed to do when I make commitments. But instead, when I'm being defensive, it looks like, well, you didn't put my laundry away or whatever we've agreed to. Instead of me owning it, I'm like, well, these are all the things you're not doing, right? I don't know if you want to add to this as I go, but
no, I like in my mind, when I think of defensive, I think of like defend, like you're defending yourself. So you come up with all the reasons why it's, like you did the thing you did and it was justified.
Yeah. Like, so if I didn't wash the van Saturday, it's like, well, the kids called me, this happened, and I become a victim to it. And, we could talk about what to do about all those things, but I think we're just trying to outline what these horses are.
Yeah.
So
we've got stonewalling, defensiveness.
So we got, excuse me, contempt.
Contempt.
This is kind of like, for me, it's like sarcastic disrespect. It could be like body language, like, or like eye rolling, or like a vindictive smile can be really like I've been labeled as passive aggressive by others, and sometimes they're right, sometimes I think they're wrong. But this is a really, really big one. I think John says this is one of the biggest or strongest predicators to divorce, actually. But when I used to like have situations where I would be in a confrontation in high school, I was kind of a smaller guy, and I would run my mouth. And one of those things is I would just repeat whatever someone else said, but in like a sarcastic tone. And I think that's total contempt.
Yeah.
So disrespectful, sarcasm, body language stuff. Criticism is the 4th one. We've kind of covered it a little bit, but you're just attacking someone else's character. Sometimes you're doing that for multiple reasons, but you're just being super critical and not maybe giving them the benefit of the doubt, stuff like that.
Yeah.
All
And
things are easy to do.
absolutely. And we all do all of them, I'm sure, at some point in time or another. But the point here is that we usually have a favorite for most of us. Like we have one that we go to. And so you pay attention, like you use this as a tool of awareness, because that's what you notice coming up for you when you are contentious, when you are feeling that anger, right? So that's how that's where this tool becomes useful, is being able to use that as, oh, wait, I'm falling into this normal like pattern that I fall into.
Yeah. So like for like LDS culture, we've been married 10, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever the case is. And you and your spouse have patterned responses and behaviors, and then you're just in a rut. Mm-hmm. And if you're out of that 70-30 balance, or whatever you feel like your balance is, it might be time to really start fighting for the relationship, because it is so boring. Because the consequences, roommate syndrome, disconnectedness, lack of trust, it's no longer fun, because there really is no volatility in the relationship, because both of you are just happy to get along, or what do people say? Agree to disagree. And you've got all these wedges in the relationship because you've been married for decades. And now you wonder why it's just kind of blah. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
I can hear people right now saying, okay, hold on a second, Glenn. Did you just say we should just start fighting on purpose?
Absolutely. Because fighting is the gym to relationships. Does that make sense? And so I loved the gym because I could make progress there. I had full control. And then I would come home to the marriage and I would avoid it, and I would stonewall. And I would probably be this passive aggressive guy that's just like, your problem, I don't know how to help you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And everybody has their own unique rut that they're in. But one of the thoughts that changed my entire marriage, and this is a guy, if you haven't heard my story, like I put a gun in my hand in 2013, not to end myself, it was to hurt my wife by hurting myself, because of all the hurt I thought she was doing to me. And that's a really, really dark realization to have. And in my healing process, I realized that's what it was. And I knew that was my truth, because it just punched me in the heart. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that is very, very, very dark. But it was my truth at the time. So I had this dark, crazy moment. And then I don't know if it was months or years of healing when I finally realized why I had this really dark moment was to hurt somebody by hurting myself. And in the process of doing that, I'm like, what am I going to do? And I felt very fathered by God, because I didn't really have a coach. I had coaches, but it was more business related or other things. And I recognized that my wife, when she fights me, my old model, if you're familiar with CTFAR, it's this tool of recognizing how your thoughts produce how you're feeling. Your feelings lead to how you behave, and those behaviors produce your results. And so when my wife would present with fighting fair, and she's actually really good at it in terms of keeping those four horsemen out of it. And what I realized is I thought she was disrespecting me. So as this model goes, because I felt disrespected, I showed up disrespectful. Mm-hmm. So for me, that looked like all these four horses. And I was like, holy smokes, there's all of my parts to this. And all those four horses make me feel bad, make me regret my reactions because of my own anger. Mm-hmm. But again, I'm blaming her because her anger is disrespectful. So the thought that changed my entire marriage was, she's not fighting me, she's fighting for us. Yeah. And now I saw this very disrespectful woman as a woman who was willing to put it all on the line and show up every time was necessary to fight not me, but to fight for us. And I just had so much compassion. I still didn't understand how to handle her. I still didn't know how to handle myself. I still don't know how to navigate it, but I had that new thought, that new seed of, wow, she cares so much. Look how crazy she's willing to be in order to fight for us. And that completely like set me on a totally new trajectory on how I handled her anger and my reaction to her anger with my own.
Isn't it amazing what one little like open in the door? That's kind of how I think of it, as just like barely cracking the door open just a little bit with a new thought can just blow your mind, really. And even though like it just gives you the opportunity to allow other things in, to see that, oh, maybe it wasn't really that after all. It just allows space for other
It does.
things.
And sometimes that door blows wide open and everything flows through it. And sometimes you're kind of a little bit cautious and skeptical, and that's okay too. But that pivot or that change has now been planted. And what ended up working for me is I had this gym bag, where I would go to the gym and all these things helped me produce the results that I wanted there. And now I just needed to produce tools and awarenesses in a gym bag for my marriage and how I fought. And one of those tools was realizing my judgment towards anger, realizing that these 4 horses were a great place to identify contention, because I really needed to give space for anger, because there's a lot in life worth fighting for. And so if we're looking at politics and all this online stuff, or even politics inside the church, it's like anger could be good if we can keep contention out of it. And so then the question kind of becomes like, well, how do we do that? Like,
what does that
even look like? Right.
Yeah.
And so 2 or 3 thoughts, and I'm kind of rolling with the punches here, but one of those is seek to understand. Like, I don't know if we're really seeking to understand people online, and if we're not, it might not be worth engaging with. Because if we're having a response like anger, how much time is it going to cost you energetically to get back into the spirit of your day? And so now it's almost like, okay, I need to intentionally go in to these political environments or economical or even our own faith, right? Like there's situations in chat rooms, so to speak, where things make us angry. And that anger is just a response. Like when I talk to men, I try to help them see that emotions are like the dashboard on your airplane or your motorcycle or whatever. It's like you got low oil, and it's like, what do you do with low oil? And they're like, you pull over and you add oil. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want to do with this emotion that feels so negative? Because the low oil light is not a negative thing. Anyway, I'm getting outside the scope of what we're talking about today, but seeking to understand, that's been really crucial. And I can practice that in my marriage every day, because we fight all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think for the most part, people don't want to seek to understand. They want to hold on to what they believe, because first of all, it feels very safe to just hold on to that. So that can be a really hard one, but it's really important to just seek for understanding. That opens up the conversation, even allows you to have a conversation.
And if you're seeking to understand so that you can manipulate and gaslight and all these buzzwords,
it's a no-go.
Then you've got to realize, dude, you're going to make this problem way worse. So at what spirit are you going about seeking to understand? Because I've heard of this is men. This is a really bad example from men, but men will literally go round and round and intentionally confuse their wife with questions and stuff, spin them around until they're so dizzy they don't even know what happened, and then they win the argument. And it's awful, but that's one of the patterns of how these men or women, I don't want to put men on the full blame here, but that's one of the ways that we can manipulate the situation based on our ability to seek to understand. So there's always a dark side to these tools. So the second one I thought of is seek to be understood. So now I need to be very integral with myself in expressing, this is truly how I'm thinking, why I'm thinking this way, why I'm wrong, why I'm right. And can I articulate that in a way that really delivers to my spouse or a business partner or whatever the case might be? Because if they can't ever understand me, then this relationship's going to be stuck for one or both of us until we can do that. And then the third one is just give the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. That's always a great place to start, that the people you're choosing to have relationships with, they're good people and they have good intentions. There's all kinds of things going on around them that could be making anger the secondary emotion. I've heard that said, where it's covering up other hurt, fears, and frustrations. And so, anger generally is just an indicator as to other things that are going on that need to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to that seek to be understood piece, because, and I think this helps with the communication. I'm going to go back to John Gottman's book, the Fight Right book that I was sharing about. He talks in there about, in order to be understood, it's not going to be helpful to go into conversation and be like, like to just go in with criticism or say, or the contempt, right? To show up with any of the four horsemen. But it is to start with you, like to be understood. The best way to be understood is to share how you're feeling. Like, I feel, and don't give a one-word emotion. Like, I feel hurt, or I feel rejected, or I feel like, open with that emotion that you feel, because that's very vulnerable, and also like can dissolve some of the contempt, because you're not then projecting it on the other person. You're saying how you feel and you're owning that feeling. But then you do have to at some point connect, I feel this when, this is happening. So anyway, I just think it's important for people to understand a good way to even start that conversation of being understood.
So one way to use stonewalling as a positive tool is, if you're feeling this fight or flight flooded response, you've just been spun around yourself, whatever the case is. It's like, hey, I'm not stonewalling, I'm not leaving and abandoning you. I need to recompose myself. I'll be back in 20 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days, 2 months, whatever it is, but definitively give that person a timeline. And if you need more time, then you need to come back in 20 minutes and be like, I think I need a couple more minutes. But if you're out there coming up with your defense, so that you can come back to validate why you're responding the way you are, then you're using that space incorrectly. Gottman suggests that you go and do nothing, like clear your brain. I don't know that I agree with that. I would say more of getting into my own space where I'm self-coaching, where I'm like, what just happened? What are the real raw emotions here? What's at the root of this? Is this part of a pattern with this relationship? What's the outcome I'm trying to produce? Not so that I'm right, but in the end, where am I really trying to go with this? And if I seek to understand the other person, like, it just clears everything up, because now I'm like, oh my goodness, I totally see why you're responding this way. That makes sense. And you're misjudging me. But I presented myself with annoyance and anger and all this passive aggressiveness. And so, I didn't really show up very honest to what I was thinking, but I was very reactive. And so it's just this ability to have a conversation within your tribe, like your wife or your husband, and being like, how are we going to navigate these fights so that we can fight fair or fight right, or based on the facts? How can I own my part? Am I going to move forward whether she owns hers or my spouse owns theirs? And what are we going to do to jostle this thing up? And so I think starting with this idea of one, do I have judgment for anger? Do I allow myself to feel angry? When I feel angry, is it reactive? Because if it is, I probably need to have a process to, once I feel that rush. And then third, I think people really, I don't know if there was two, but we'll just pretend there was, and I'll say third, is really identify that every unique situation and relationship and marriage and situation within that marriage, or whatever the relationship is that we're talking about, it's going to need its own process. So like you and your spouse, we're talking about spouses today, I guess, or but you guys both have your reality boxes of how you perceive life and the rules and the faith and the doctrine and scriptures and all these things. And now you're coming together trying to figure out how to navigate this together. And so if you understand their perspective, that doesn't make them right, but it also doesn't make them wrong. And we've got to like marry this. But if we're so contentious all the time, we're never really going to have the spirit or the ability to navigate this and really grow together. And so I think that's why I wanted to talk about anger a little bit, is just to be like, hey, let's disrupt our thoughts about anger. And are we making a judgment that it's contentious? And then what are we going to do about it? Because anger is great. Like, there's a lot of things worth fighting for. And as Americans, as a society, as Christians, there's a lot of things that we need to step up and fight fair over, whether it's in our homes or in our communities. And because it's contentious, none of us are doing it. None of us are fighting back. And now we're losing more and more freedoms. We're losing more and more relationships. And the life that we wanted to have is like literally like dissipating from us, all because we don't know how to fight back without being contentious, how to fight back and still have the spirit and feel good afterwards.
Mm-hmm. I could just say amen. Should we just say amen?
I
And close it
know,
with
we
that?
totally could. You got 3 minutes, so you got to hit the eject button. But no, I maybe got on a soapbox there a little bit, but I hope people realize that fighting is okay. And that's really all I want to say.
Yeah.
Is let's fight, but let's figure out how to do it in a way where we're making progress and we still feel good about it afterwards. And guess what? If you don't do it the way you want, you can totally apologize. Like, imagine that. Like, you react to somebody and you're like, hey, I don't care if you forgive me, but for myself, I have to say sorry and I have to be understood. Here's where I was coming from. Here's what I was thinking. I've been thinking about it, and I think I was wrong about this and this. If you want to keep talking, we can, but I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And that's hard to do, but there's so much power in just those two words.
Yeah. But you're cutting yourself free.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
like there's this buzz phrase of so and so is living rent free in your mind because you just can't stop being mad at them. Or you know what I'm saying?
Yep. Uh-huh.
And it's like, well, the best way to stop being mad is just go apologize.
Yep.
So anyway, there's lots of nuggets here, I think, for all of us. I'm nowhere near like up to par on managing contention yet, but it is an indicator that, hey, I'm out of alignment with myself. I've lost the spirit, and I really want to do anything I can to get that back. So the faster I can repent, say sorry, do my part, open up dialect and conversation, and be uncomfortable, we can start fighting fair again, you know?
Yeah. Love it. It's a lifelong process, right? It's not
Yeah.
something that we're probably going to ever just be like, oh, now I've done it. I've achieved it.
No.
I know how to do this right.
Yeah. I have 7 kids. None of them are married. I got the potential to have 7 in-laws, potentially 21 if they all get divorced and remarried 3 times. And it's like, those are relationships that I don't know how to navigate yet.
Yep.
So of course I'm gonna get triggered and I'm gonna have trauma responses and all these buzzwords, but all those are just invitations from the Savior to like keep growing, endure to the end, use the atonement, keep moving forward with faith. All the things that we talk about, we just really got to live it.
Yeah.
Jesus got angry, right?
Yeah. First. Yes, absolutely.
So.
All right, Glenn, tell people where they can find more of you, because there's a lot that can still be found here in this conversation, I think.
I operate off of Your Goal is My Goal and Progress Creates Happiness. If that sounds fun to you, you can go to glennlovelace.com and you can schedule a call. They're free, the first one. Sometimes I give a couple for free. You can go to the One Day, One Life podcast. You can message me on Instagram. It's Your Wingman. If you just don't want to talk to me, but you're like, hey, will you do a podcast on this situation? I'll totally do it without throwing you under the bus if you're wanting to share it with a business partner or a spouse or a son or whatever. And I'm just here to help because your goal is my goal. And I really believe that, you know, the goal isn't really to be happy all the time, but I sure like making progress because it does make me feel happy.
Love it. Thank you so much, Glenn. This is fantastic. and one that I think we all know people we want to share this with. So share it. And
passively aggressively share it with everybody that you're mad at and tell them it's their fault.
Passive aggressiveness, right? We all have a little bit of it.
Glenn said it's your fault, and we'll see how it goes.
I love it. Thanks everybody for being here. And Glenn, thank you so much. We will catch you all again next time. Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.